Right this second, while you're watching this video, Chris Watts just received a communication inside his Wisconsin prison cell. Not from family. Not from media. Not from some true crime fanatic online. This message came from one of the most feared criminal organizations operating in American prisons today, the Aryan Brotherhood. Before we go any further, we need to remember Shannon Watts, Bella, Celeste, and Nico, the precious souls whose lives were stolen. Please type Amen in the comments to honor their memory. They deserve to be remembered not just as victims, but as the beautiful people they were. And drop your location below. I want to know where you're watching from around the world. I'm Liam Oliver, crime analyst for True Crime Cellblock. I lost 2 of my own children to murder, and that pain drives me to investigate these cases. The FOIA requests, the court documents, the traveling, gathering information, it's exhausting work. Some days I want to quit. But I remember these victims matter just like my children did. If I stop, who speaks for them? Your support keeps me going, and I appreciate every single one of you more than you know. December 15, 2025. A corrections officer at Dodge Correctional Institution is conducting routine mail inspection. Sorting through letters and packages, standard procedure. Then something catches his attention. An envelope addressed to inmate 17B529. Chris Watts. The return address doesn't officially exist. But the guard immediately recognizes what he's looking at. Drawn in the corner of that envelope sits a symbol that every correctional officer in America knows on sight. 3 leaves forming a shamrock. The unmistakable mark of the Aryan Brotherhood. When they reach out to someone, it's never random. They always have a purpose. So what could they possibly want from Chris Watts? But before I reveal what that letter contained, you need to understand something the media hasn't really covered. Chris Watts has transformed into something completely unexpected behind bars since 2018. Something that captured the attention of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the entire prison system. What I'm about to share will completely change your understanding of where this story is heading. Let's go back to where it started. The first night. August 2018. A transport van pulls up to the maximum security facility intake area under cover of darkness. Inside sits Chris Watts. Why nighttime instead of during the day? Simple answer, protection. When someone like Watts enters the system, every inmate already knows exactly who he is and what he did. In prison hierarchy, people who harm women and children exist at the absolute bottom. Actually, they rank below the bottom. They bring him in at night when most inmates are locked down and sleeping. It's the safest approach. But safer doesn't mean safe. The intake process stretches for hours. Photographs, fingerprints, hundreds of questions. Medical history. Mental health evaluation. Gang affiliations. Known enemies. Potential threats. Then comes the critical decision. Where to place him. Prisons operate with different classification levels. General population is where most inmates live, eat together, work together, have limited freedom of movement. But Chris Watts can't go there. Within 6 hours of arriving, he received his first threat. Actually, not his first 47 threats. 47 different inmates found ways to send messages in under 6 hours. Some through other inmates, some through sympathetic guards, some just shouted across the halls. All saying the same thing. If Watts ever left protective custody, he wouldn't survive a day. But here's what never made the news. One threat was different. It arrived at 2 a.m. A piece of paper slid under his temporary cell door. 3 words written on it, "We know everything." That's all. 3 words. But it wasn't the words that sent chills through him. It was the symbol drawn at the bottom. A shamrock. 3 leaves. The mark of the Aryan Brotherhood. If you're unfamiliar with prison politics, that symbol might not mean much. But anyone who's spent time in the system knows exactly what it represents. The Brotherhood doesn't make contact unless they want something specific. From day 1, from hour 6, they've been watching Chris Watts. The question is why? What could they possibly want from him? Protective custody reality. Let me explain what protective custody actually means. Most people hear that term and think it sounds safe, like someone's being protected. Technically true, Watts is being protected from other inmates who want to hurt him. But here's the reality of protective custody. 23 hours per day locked in a cell. Let me emphasize that. 23 hours. Every single day. The cell measures approximately 8 by 10 feet. Smaller than most bathrooms. In that space, a bed, toilet, sink, and basically nothing else. 1 hour daily for recreation time but completely alone. No interaction with other inmates. No basketball, no weights, none of what you see in prison movies. He walks in a small yard by himself with guards watching. Then returns to his cell. Every single day for the rest of his life. Imagine spending 23 hours daily in a parking space-sized room with nothing to do, no one to talk to, just you and your thoughts. For most people, that breaks them psychologically. It's among the hardest things human beings can endure. Research shows prolonged isolation causes depression, anxiety, hallucinations. Some people lose their grip on reality completely. But Chris Watts adapted. And that's where this story takes a disturbing turn. The legal education. June 2019, less than a year after Watts entered the system. A prison education counselor files an unusual report, flagged for review. What? Chris Watts has been requesting law books. Specific books about criminal procedure, constitutional law, prison litigation, how the legal system operates. Inmates requesting books isn't unusual. Many try to educate themselves, read, study, improve. But Watts wasn't casually reading. He was intensively studying, taking detailed notes, diving deep into legal material. Within 8 months, he filed 14 different grievances challenging his conditions, treatment, classification, arguing certain policies violated his rights using legal language and citing actual cases. 13 grievances were dismissed as lacking merit. But one went through. One actually worked. A small victory, a minor change to his conditions. Nothing huge, but he won. And in prison that matters enormously. It proved Watts wasn't some helpless guy in his cell. He was intelligent, capable of navigating the system, finding weaknesses in legal processes and exploiting them. When you can do that in prison, you become valuable. Very valuable. Prison economy. Let me explain something about maximum security prisons. There's an economy, but not like the one outside. It's not primarily about money. The currency is information, protection, and power. Some inmates have drugs, that's currency. Some have outside connections, that's currency. Some have muscle, can hurt people, that's also currency. But there's another type most people don't consider: legal knowledge. Thousands of inmates are trying to appeal cases, challenge sentences, fight for better conditions. But most don't understand the legal system, can't write proper motions or briefs. They need help. If you can provide that help, you become incredibly valuable. By 2020, Chris Watts was doing something that shocked prison officials. He was helping other inmates with their legal cases, writing motions, finding loopholes, studying case files, identifying errors. And he was genuinely good at it. 3 inmates Watts helped got sentencing reductions. Not massive reductions, but enough to matter. Enough to get noticed. 2 others won appeals for better conditions, better cells, food, more recreation time. The 2026 updates. Now here's where things get even more complex in 2026. At 40 years old, Watts has been maintaining an interesting public persona. In correspondence from late 2025 and early 2026, he claims to have found God in prison. He's expressed belief that his imprisonment represents God's will, that his suffering will somehow bring people closer to faith. Despite his confinement, Watts continues maintaining contact with multiple women from prison. Letters revealed in late 2025 show him using religious and emotional language to keep these women invested in his life. In late 2025, he reportedly ended a romantic correspondence with a woman identified as Deborah, stating that God has other plans for my life. Reports indicate he spends most time in isolation or under close supervision for safety. He's previously held custodian jobs within the prison. Since incarceration, Watts has received at least 2 conduct reports, one in 2020 for unauthorized communication, another in 2021 for possessing contraband. So while he presents this religious transformation publicly, his prison record tells a more complicated story. The letter. December 15, 2025. Back to where this started. The letter. Mail screening is routine. Every piece gets checked for contraband, gang communications, anything violating rules. This letter immediately gets flagged because of that symbol. The 3-leaf shamrock in the corner. The guard doesn't open it. He takes it straight to the warden's office. Protocol: any suspected gang communication goes to the top. I can't show you what's actually in that letter. It's evidence in an ongoing investigation, not released publicly. But sources say it contains something unexpected. The letter doesn't threaten Watts. No violence implied, no demands. Instead, it makes an offer. Full protection inside Dodge Correctional and any facility he might transfer to. No more protective custody, no more 23 hours daily in a tiny cell. Access to general population, better conditions, better food, more phone privileges, more visitation. Everything an inmate could possibly want. But there's always a price. The Brotherhood wants Chris Watts as their legal consultant. They want him reviewing cases for their members, writing motions, filing appeals, finding legal loopholes for reduced sentences, overturned convictions, better conditions. They want him as their lawyer from inside prison. The impossible position. Let me explain why this puts Watts in an extremely dangerous position. If he accepts, he immediately becomes a target. The Aryan Brotherhood has enemies. Many enemies. The Mexican Mafia, the Black Guerrilla Family, other organizations competing for prison power. They don't appreciate anyone helping the Brotherhood. If Watts starts working for them, his life expectancy drops dramatically. We're talking months, maybe weeks, before someone from a rival organization attempts to hurt him. But here's the other side. If he refuses, the Brotherhood doesn't just say, "Okay, thanks anyway." When they make offers and someone says no, there are consequences. Severe consequences. Inmates who turn down recruitment typically face one of two outcomes: severe injury or death. There's no neutral position. The moment that letter was sent, Watts stopped being just another inmate serving time. He became a piece on a chessboard, forced to choose sides. The other offers. But it gets more complicated. There's something the Brotherhood might not know about, or maybe they do, and that's precisely why they chose this moment. Chris Watts has been receiving other offers. From legitimate law firms on the outside. These firms specialize in criminal defense, wrongful convictions, finding legal errors for sentence reductions or overturned convictions. They want to hire Watts as a paralegal consultant from prison. This is actually legitimate. Prisons have work programs where inmates perform legal work for outside organizations. It's monitored, gives inmates purpose and skills beyond sitting in cells all day. One law firm has contacted Watts 3 times in the past year, wanting his help reviewing case files, looking for legal errors, identifying problems their attorneys might miss. It's legitimate legal work that could give him meaning, maybe even a path to something resembling redemption. 3 days before the Brotherhood's letter arrived, Watts told his attorney he was seriously considering accepting one of these offers. 3 days. The timing isn't random. Someone inside or connected to the prison informed them that Watts was about to take a legitimate job, establish himself independently. They couldn't let that happen. So they sent their letter, their offer, their way of saying you're either with us or against us. The federal angle. But there's a third option almost nobody's discussing. And it might be the most dangerous option of all. What if Watts doesn't choose either side? What if someone else wants him to make a very different choice? Here's what most people don't realize. Watts isn't just dealing with the Brotherhood, isn't just weighing options between a prison gang and legitimate work. There are other players operating way above prison politics level. I'm talking about the federal government. January 2024, 10 months before the Brotherhood sent their letter, the FBI opened an investigation. Specifically the Domestic Terrorism Task Force. You might wonder what domestic terrorism has to do with prison gangs. Everything actually. Organizations like the Aryan Brotherhood aren't just prison gangs anymore. They've evolved with outside networks, involved in organized crime, drug trafficking, violence extending beyond prison walls. There's growing concern about prison radicalization, how these organizations recruit members, spread ideology, coordinate criminal activity between prisons and the outside world. The FBI wants to understand and dismantle these networks. To do that, they need information. They need someone inside who can explain how these organizations operate. The notes. During his 6 years in prison, Chris Watts has been keeping detailed notes. About threats received, gang activity witnessed, conversations overheard, the structure and operation of various organizations inside. Originally, he kept these for his own legal protection. If something happened, if he got hurt, he wanted documentation that he'd been threatened, that he'd reported it, that prison officials knew about the danger. But federal investigators believe those notes could be incredibly valuable. They think Watts' documentation could help bring down multiple gang networks, not just the Aryan Brotherhood but other organizations too. March 2024. Watts is pulled from his cell without warning or explanation. Taken to an administrative office where two people he's never seen wait. They're not prison officials. They're wearing suits, carrying badges. Federal agents. And they have a proposal for Chris Watts. The three choices. So now we understand the full picture in 2026. Chris Watts faces three impossible choices, each with its own deadly consequences. Choice 1. Accept the Brotherhood's protection. Become their legal consultant. Live with better conditions but spend every day looking over his shoulder for rival gangs who'll want him dead. Help one of America's most dangerous organizations and become a criminal forever. Choice 2. Take the legitimate law firm offer. Try to build something meaningful, maybe find redemption through legal work. But risk Brotherhood retaliation for refusing their recruitment. History shows that rarely ends well. Choice 3. Work with the FBI. Provide information about gang networks. Help federal investigators dismantle these organizations. Potentially reduce his sentence, get better protection. But become an informant, which in prison is the lowest thing you can possibly be. If anyone discovers it, he won't survive a week. Each path leads to danger. Each choice could be his last. And he has to decide soon because the Brotherhood doesn't wait forever for answers. The bigger question. But here's the question I keep asking myself. Does Chris Watts deserve any of these opportunities? Does he deserve the chance to help other people through legal work? Does he deserve protection, better conditions, meaningful purpose? Or should he spend the rest of his life exactly where he is, in a cell the size of a parking space, alone with his thoughts about what he did to Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico? I don't have that answer. That's something each of you has to decide for yourselves. What I do know is this: the Chris Watts story isn't over. It's evolving in ways nobody predicted 6 years ago. He's become a valuable commodity in the prison system. Different organizations, different agencies, different groups all want to use him for their own purposes. And somehow, the man who destroyed his own family has ended up in a position where he might help bring down criminal organizations, or join them, or work legitimately, or become a federal informant. The next few months will determine which path he takes. And whatever he chooses will have consequences that extend far beyond his individual life. Thank you for watching this investigation. If this opened your eyes to something you didn't know before, hit that like button, share this with someone interested in true crime, and subscribe to True Crime Cellblock for more detailed investigations. Drop a comment below. What do you think Chris Watts should do? Does he deserve any of these opportunities? Should we care what happens to him at all? And remember, this isn't about glorifying what happened. It's about understanding the complete story, because that's the only way we learn anything meaningful. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and never forget the real victims: Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. They mattered. They still matter. They always will. This is Liam Oliver, True Crime Cellblock.